I'll let you take over and introduce yourself, who you are, what you got going on. I put some stuff in the link, so we've talked about you a little bit. We just watched actually one of your video compilations of High Tech High, of just learning space here a little bit to kind of cue things up, but I didn't want to steal any of your thunder. So I'll let you work your magic and do what you do best.
Well, okay. So, good morning, everybody. Yeah, so my name is Lene. I'm based in Denmark, and I run a consultancy that we call Authentic, which sort of like in Danish means something like authentic, and then again it means nothing. So that was important too, that it can mean many things to many people. But at the root of what we do is try to be authentic to the students that we meet, the teachers that we meet, and how we can create both the pedagogy, the learning that we want to see, and not least the learning spaces to support everybody who's in the room and doing the work. So, Aaron, there are several ways we could do this. Like I can go through some slides. We can run a workshop. We can be interactive. I can see you all have computers, and I imagine you can go online.
Yep, we can go
Yeah,
online.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it can also be a conversation. So whatever you'd like us to do, that's, we can go and do that. What do you think?
Yeah, how about we set the stage a little bit? So for context, they're working with teachers, and we're just trying to figure out ways to kind of maybe break some of the traditional ways of thinking about learning space. We know we can't always get to do the big, huge projects like you get to do. We're redesigning like physical buildings, but within the spaces we have, what are some of those tangible ways as we think about creating that student-centered, that hands-on, that discovery and wonder, that kind of as the learning space of that third teacher. How do we think about that with intentionality, or for them to help
Yep.
teachers think about that so we have more success and the space doesn't become a hindrance to those opportunities once we get some adults willing to take that courageous step to allow wonder and discovery to happen.
Yep. Sounds good. So why don't we, I'd actually like to start with something where you dive into like some of what you find important. So if I share a link with you, let me see in the chat, could you share it then with the group? And if you have,
Yep, I'll put it in
and
the,
what I'm aiming to do now is like, I'm gonna share a lot of images from classrooms, from like learning spaces, mostly from schools. And I want you to study them, take a look at them, and then pick out some of the ones that you think are helpful to what you think should be going on in a classroom. So I guess you can see my screen. So all of these pictures, like just like take a little walk around here and look at them and see what speaks to you. And if you could just like if you group up with the people next to you, so you have like group 1, 2, 3, and 4, you can organize that in the room. And then like if you have something you think is like that looks great, or there's something interesting about this, just take the picture and drag it to the group board. So I'll give you maybe 5 minutes, and then we'll have a conversation about that. And after that, I'm going to go through some of the thinking that we're doing with schools, teachers, students. But let's see.
perfect.
Awesome. Let's see where you're at.
Okay. Give us some time here then. Yeah. All right. I think we're ready to share some thoughts if you're ready.
Yeah. Yep. Let's hear it.
All right. Group number 1, what were some of your thoughts? Maybe I think you can see everybody here. So we'll just have you guys share out some things. What were some of your commonalities or things that stood out to you guys?
We really like the different seating, like the kids sitting in the tunnel or the little circles. The learning spaces where kids were working together and there's really no teacher present.
Were you able to hear them okay?
Interesting. Yeah. Yes.
All right, perfect.
Interesting.
Awesome.
This one didn't really fit our theme, but just thinking outside the school walls. So we liked the outdoor kind of classroom setup as well.
Yeah.
And then we also picked a few that had like space for kids to use their imagination and just think outside the box.
Right. Excellent.
Great.
What about group 2? What were your thoughts or things that you guys pulled from?
So we noticed a lot of the design of the building in terms of like having a choice of going up the stairs or doing the rock wall. Doing the sensory walks in the hallways and like the Lego boards and things like that, we thought were super awesome, but then also we chose the whole tunnel. So where it's like you have this huge open space, but what about our kids who want or need like that enclosed space for a little bit of time too? So those little places to kind of snuggle up.
Great.
They have a lot
Yeah.
of manipulatives in there as well.
Yeah. Well, kind of, I know we talked about it just real briefly, but David Thornburg's work, right? The campfire, the watering hole, the cave.
Mm.
Start to see some of those design pieces of, yeah, what's it look like if I do just need some like confined space? What happens if I do need some freedom just because, you know, in different parts of the day? So yeah, interesting stuff for sure. What about group 3?
I'm not gonna lie, I picked quieter spaces, cause some, like, I get overwhelmed in like those big, open, loud spaces. A couple of the ones like the, like library, like the open library space, but then I also picked like the outside as well. Just because they are places where you can get the quiet that maybe you need, but also like there's still going to be other people with you. It's not just a single person kind of space.
Great,
One of
thanks.
the one- oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
one of the ones that I picked where it looked, with all the sea animals and it looked like a desk, but it looks like the student maybe got to surround it with things that they're interested in or really liked, to make it their own and comfortable. I see an astronaut. So I feel like, if there was a space that the kids could almost decorate or put what they like to make it their own, that would be a space that they would like to work at.
Great. Yeah,
What about
thanks.
group 4?
So I picked spaces that to me just were like 8-year-old Mike's adventure world. It's like absolutely, my fantasy as a kid is, having spaces where I can just go and explore and do whatever I want. And so particularly the one where there's a room and there's someone like camping on top of a ceiling or like there's a fort room underneath it. But it's just like, that makes me excited. And I think entering a space that way changes the mindset of the person when they get excited to walk into a room.
I like the igloo fort. I saw a lot of like stadium type seating, and it almost reminded me of like pictures I've seen of like Socrates and like Plato, like they're like in the middle and there's people around them.
Were you guys group 5 or did you
We
just
were
throw in?
4.
Or you were 4? Okay.
Must have both been put.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
There's no 5 groups, so
Yeah, one of the things that we noticed about the pictures that we selected, that Stephanie has selected, is just they were spaces where kids were doing or that were built for collaboration.
Similar to what you guys were saying, I think our other theme had to do with it was about the students. That we didn't focus in on like what the teacher would need to be in that situation and just like what are we actually promoting in kids and how does the space cultivate that? So we want kids to be doing and engaging. We want them to be doing the heavy lifting and just how you can create something or use design to ensure that those processes happen. Or like like Erin was saying, we fall on this like traditional mindset, but if we want kids to be doing the heavy lifting, how does our traditional mindset maybe prohibit them from doing those things?
Well, thank you so much, everybody. I don't know if everybody got to share now because it's a little bit
we got
difficult.
everybody.
Yeah, great. Otherwise, help me out, Erin. So
I got
thanks. Those were like a lot of great observations that are really important when you talk about how we can design space intentionally. And if you also look at all the pictures that were selected, we do see colors, we do see organic shapes, we see a lot of nature. And we certainly don't see a lot of traditional spaces that they would look like in like most classrooms that we come across. I'm gonna share a few slides to sort of address what kind of thinking goes into the work around learning spaces. And Erin, I don't know, did you share the slides that you sent me? Or just to
Yeah,
yeah. Okay, so there might be something that are, it's a bit along those lines, of course. But let's have a go here. First of all, this is just to sort of explain a little bit about who we are, what we do. We work with schools to talk about the vision for learning and how we can bring that to life. We do professional development, and we work with a lot of students and teachers to co-design their schools and working alongside architects to really shape those spaces that are helpful and useful to everyone. And we have friends we play with across the globe. Erin, you're one of them. So, and yeah, that's just really inspiring to meet people from all sorts of countries and their educational traditions. But there are so many commonalities that I think we can, that are helpful to all of us. So, I noticed a lot of you picked out a picture from this school. It's a very unusual school that we have here in Denmark with a lot of, it's more sort of open spaces, but when you do open spaces, you have to make sure to do a lot of sort of like more secluded spaces and the cave spaces. So it's not just like one or the other, it's typically a both and. In many schools that we work with, when we have a conversation around what the future of learning, what they'd like learning to look like, teaching and learning and well-being in their schools, they might have a vision along these lines, maybe a little bit more simple, but something like this is what, the dream of what it is that we're able to do as a school. And most schools that I walk into, not least in my country, they have classrooms that look like this. So this is where we'd imagine the creativity to unfold, all this sort of the citizenship and the change making. And I know, Erin, you probably talked about this, but what we are doing when we shape our spaces is that we are creating or supporting a particular learning culture or organizational culture. This is a very different learning environment with a different kind of culture. And certainly, I know you did have a look at the high-tech high environment, I'm sure.
Yep,
And
yep.
and that's certainly a different invitation when you look at compare that to the first picture I showed you. So basically what we're talking about and what I think is a useful way of thinking about learning spaces is to think about it as organizational culture or learning culture. So you have those layers where the artifacts, that's what you can see, what you can hear, and they're communicating the expected behaviors and norms in this space. And underneath it all, for it to make sense, there are some basic assumptions around how we learn. And I think you probably went through this, Erin. Sort of like this room is telling you to sit down and be quiet and do what the teacher would like you to do. And for this to make sense, we all need the same thing at the same time and learn the same way. And I've never come across a school that thinks about learning in this way. Not to say that this doesn't have a role in teaching and learning. It certainly does, but it's about the balance. And you have to also look at what kind of spaces are available and how do you balance the culture so that you make sure that the most important parts of your culture are also dominant in the learning spaces and not the thing I think, typically when many teachers here would say, oh, it's just like 10% of the time is when we, teach from the board and we'll have the children sit down and listen to this. And most of the time we'd be collaborating or creating. It's rarely what the students would tell us about their experience though, but the spaces, they do look like most of the time is about just speaking at the children. So some useful perspectives when you look at learning spaces and when you walk into your own schools and the teachers that you work with, their schools. What is the narrative here? What are the spaces communicating? about what learning could look like and what you're able to do. What is it inviting you to do, and how does it make you feel? If you were a student and you walked into this space, what would you think that they are thinking when they look at you, when they invite you in? What do they want from you, and what do they invite you to do? So that's like this whole narrative, or like the communication of the space. And then also another perspective is, how can we use the space as a tool to help us create great learning experiences, and to really empower students. And that was certainly a thing that came across in the pictures that you all selected. It was the empowerment and the ability to do things. I think one of you said, we see a lot of kids here working without teachers. So again, the environment is helping children work in ways that are helpful here. So just some pictures here. This is actually a staff room from one of the schools that we've been working with. It typically brings out a reaction. So why are you laughing? Yeah.
Some of our schools don't even have staff rooms.
Yeah. Leave the staff room.
We pay a lot of money on spring break to have a place like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, when you design, like you can, if you have a space, you can put so many different kinds of furniture into it. You don't have to just go with what is like what you normally do. And here we created this staff area with untraditional furniture for staff areas, but it's just so much more welcoming, because we wanted them to have a place where they could meet, where they could relax, get their shoulders down, have those more informal conversations, the watering hole in Thornburg's terminology. And it's not more expensive to do it like this. I think maybe even less sometimes. So it's really about, nobody decided for us. We're always deciding, or we can be intentional about what we want in the spaces that we share. So yeah, a staff room can look like this sometimes. So just some examples here. Also, a space here that communicates something very different from, the initial classroom space that I showed you. And this is a school that we actually helped like shift and transform the spaces completely into something where the students could really be more autonomous and could collaborate more, and just were trusted to make good choices about their learning. I'll skip this. This is High Tech High. So one of the frameworks that we use when we talk about physical environments, it's never to talk about the physical environment first. It's always to talk about the mission, the values, what we'd like learning to look like, and how we organize things, who's working with whom, and what would be helpful and useful in terms of like who should be able to do what together. So all of that is sort of the strategic framework for making a great design afterwards. And it's not about always like having money to do it. It's really about rethinking some of like how you use the spaces you have available to you. And not least, it's like one of the most important things I think you can do is to actually co-design with students, and because they have students groups, they might vary, like you have new students every year or in different classes, and like you have that conversation with students around what they need, what is important to them and meaningful. And one of you picked out the picture of a student desk that was like redesigned into something like there was an astronaut, there's a lot of things. So you could see that student being able to like really use his or her imagination and create a space that felt safe and accommodating to them. So there are many ways of collaborating with students around spaces. And what we'd also like to think about is we'd like to sort of strike the balance of making learning meaningful, engaging, and joyful, and then using the senses. A lot of you noticed like how you could, like you can use your hands, or there was something speaking to your senses. Manipulative things in the room that would actually invite you to not just sit down and listen, but to get up and do something. So really thinking about how the brain works, how learning works, and how it's really important that we allow our students to engage with the physical world, use their hands, be creative in a very like physical, hands-on way. And a lot of classrooms do not allow for that really. And one thing that I also think flows through great learning space design is, this is like some of you are probably familiar with self-determination theory, competence, autonomy, and relatedness as basic psychological needs. We all need to feel that we have something to contribute in a community that we belong to, and we all need to have a sense of autonomy. And I think, this is really important. When you look at spaces, are you allowed to make choices about the way you work? And is your work making any sense? Is it like some students that we meet? I'll quote a British colleague here. He says, like, a lot of what they feel they're asked to do is to write something down in a book, and the book goes in a bag, and then it goes in the bin, and it's like it's not going anywhere. And a lot of us would not like to, if our work was about things not really going anywhere or not being used for anything, or we're not able to really contribute, and if we were working in a place where we didn't feel we belonged, and it's something that is really stressful. And most of us would like maybe apply for a new job if we're in that situation, but our students are not often or mostly not able to quit their jobs as students. So we really have a responsibility to engage with them and figure out how can we create this learning environment together that makes sense to us. I'd like you to maybe have a go, I'd like you to have a go actually at designing a great classroom space. So if I can invite you back into the mirror board. I'll just find it again. It's right here. And so I've prepared some, over here. I'll just see if I can bring you along. To me, good. And I can see there's like something that I didn't lock properly, so I'll just lock these. Just a second. Good. So over here, I've created some like small sort of design boards, and the idea is I'll just zoom in on one of them here. I don't know if you're all with me, or I can. Good. So here you have like basically two classrooms, a corridor, and what would you like to do? So you have a choice now of designing this space. What I've done is I've put a lot of little furniture here. Like, for instance, this is a table you can drag and drop, or like a semi-round or round table, or down here is this little sort of house, and here you see it from the top, which is why it looks like that, and you can drag it to the space. So we have everything from desks, tables, tiered seating. So these are little staircases or amphi seating. We have storage, we have couches, like soft seating, bean bags. We have these little hideaways, the cave spaces. We have room dividers, we have chairs, stools, and we have lamps and everything. So, and you're also welcome to draw things yourselves. So if you could, again, split up into groups, the groups you were in before, and then take maybe 10 minutes to design some great spaces. And maybe you have two teachers collaborating across two classrooms. So that provides an opportunity that is like, it might enable you to do something that you're not able to do if you just have one classroom. So we'll go with, I can see I kind of put one on top of the other here, something happened. So we'll just like skip that one. I'll just put something over it. So that one is not available, but otherwise, like there's group 1, so 1, 2, 3, 4 was what we had before. So if group, let me see, what group number was that? That was group something in front of it. So group 2, if you go with what is called group 5 here instead, then I think we should be okay.
Perfect, we got it.
Good. All right, have fun.
It's your virtual version of how we used to cut out with like the foam board and cardboard.
Exactly. So if you want to see the real version of what we do, this is also just
there it
like a
is, yeah.
little, yeah, let's have a look. And this is a very quick, this is workshops that we do with entire like teacher, yeah, wait a second.
Right.
You wanna be inserted, this classroom on the left. Oh, you have it left?
Yeah, so it's a tool we developed, we call the Learning Space Design Lab, and it's super
Yeah.
useful to collaborate in teams around what you want from your spaces, and actually also discover that a lot is possible, even
I
though
like it.
you don't think you have space for
Right.
it, or you don't have the furniture, but there's so much you can do. So this was just like a little sort of sneak peek, and
Yeah.
this is the flat mirror online version.
Right, no, it worked, I like it. Lena, I think they could probably design on this for hours. And so I also want to make sure just respect of your time and your thoughts and ideas and their time. And I also know we've got lunch here in 10-ish minutes. So
Yeah.
I want to, if we could maybe just pull them all back to, because they'll probably
Absolutely.
continue to tinker on this even beyond our time here this morning, which is good.
Certainly. So, oh, yeah, my sound is on. So what do I have? A few minutes, Aaron?
Yeah, we got we got like 10 minutes or so. So
Oh, okay, good. So, I think you're all like, you're beginning to be designers of learning spaces, and maybe you were already. And I'd like to share a little bit about what we know from research on learning spaces. I'm just going to see if I can find I just want to share that we work with thousands of students and teachers, and what they all say is something like this, that they are looking for spaces that provide all of these sort of opportunities, that you have some choice and variety. A lot of what we call like spaces within spaces, which is also about the calm that you see on top here, the quiet nooks, the cave spaces, and nature, which is also something that is really calming for us. They want spaces where they can collaborate. They want to be able to collaborate in small teams and bigger teams, and they want social spaces. And also that we are able to communicate with each other in larger groups, so present, but it could also be the sort of exhibition part. You think about that in your spaces. And certainly creativity. How can you make things, and how can you create things that weren't there before, and things where it's not just about words and speaking, but also using your hands, and expressing things, and not least the sense of community, to feel you belong, and you can build relationships, because schools are not just about the learning that takes place. It's about living your life as a student, the sort of everyday life that you have. It's so important that you make friends, and it's a safe and nice environment that you're in, where everybody feels like they're welcome and you feel you belong. Am I still here? Yeah.
yep, you're back.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
We can hear
Good.
you.
Something strange happened. I don't know what it was. Okay, good. So we know we can see an impact. And if you look at these things, these are accountable for 16 to 25% of student progress in math, reading, and writing, so that you have access to nature and plants, and that there's like good daylight and colors that are nice to be around. The acoustic environment is super important, not least student ownership and personalization and flexibility in the classroom is important. So it's about the autonomy piece. So look at that. Are you able to do anything? Are you sort of like, can you interact with the spaces you're in and make it yours along with a group? Also, we know that apparently flexibility and diversity in a classroom in terms of how it's set up is very important if you look at math and access to nature and green areas, and also the ability to look sort of like far away to see something and not just like have everything right in front of you. So you can sort of it's calming for our nervous systems, and also you can even have like walls with images of a forest, and you can see an impact. When we look at more sort of what we call innovative learning environments, which are very flexible and diverse and with a lot of choice and opportunities to do different things, and not least they're collaborative at heart. We see a lot of active learning taking place, a lot of creativity, and a lot of students who are able to sort of self-differentiate so that it's not on the teacher to make sure that everybody gets what they need or works in ways that are helpful to them. The students are able to do that work as well, which is super important. And you need an environment of trust and collaboration to be able to do that. We also see that teachers in spaces like this are typically more creative in the way they teach. But what we also see, though, is it doesn't matter if the teachers are not working with that space or are not like maybe buying into what is going on with that space and what is the intention. So that makes it really important to have it as a shared discussion in your teams. How is it that we would like our spaces to support what we're doing? And maybe to wrap it up, we've got like a little sort of framework here also for thinking about like if you design spaces, called the 4Fs. So family is basically how do you organize things? What do you need to be able to do? Who needs to work with whom? And are there things that you might place close to each other, which would be helpful? And what are the functionalities that you want in your spaces? How do you want them to feel? What you put in to make them like to create the atmosphere you're looking for? And not least, how do you facilitate the learning that goes on there? And we love what we call micro tools, little bits and pieces that can help students self-differentiate. It could be a blanket you pull on top of yourself if you're like a young student and you want like some little cave space that you can design for yourself, or all sorts of little things that are helpful. And then the whole basis for things to work well is the acoustic environment, the air quality, the daylight, and the temperature that's okay. And in the outer circle, I've put belonging, competence, and autonomy to really think about that all the time as you create your spaces. How do you make that come through so that you empower the students and the teachers in those spaces? I just want to show you a little funny picture here because it can be super simple. So this student created a room for herself with just this cardboard box. So things do not have to be difficult. It's just like be a little bit unconventional sometimes and see what you can do together. So yeah.
Well, thank you.
All right. I think that was my time.
Yeah, no, you rocked it. You kicked butt. Before we wrap up, and I know they've got lunch, I just want to make sure, do you guys have any questions or other thoughts while we have a few minutes with her as you kind of process all these things? I know it's one more thing. We try to think about all the elements that we're all trying to do, but while you have someone who does this full time for a living to get people thinking these ways, any thoughts or questions on your mind before we let her go and enjoy what remains of her evening? Yeah, go ahead.
We work with the new teachers in our districts. What are some low budget ways to do this in the classroom with, without any school support, just teachers, what can they do in a classroom?
One of the things you can do is rearrange the desks and chairs and make sure you have what you need and not what you don't need in that room. To look at how it can be more, like you can design it with students. It's actually a great conversation to have together and then say, hey, everything goes. Let's just take all of the furniture out and see what do we want to put in and how do we want to use it. So that doesn't cost anything to look at that. It could also be instead of having like once, like you sit in this seat and you sit in that seat, like you're not able to make any choices. You could have maybe like you have what do you call it, like a band of time where you say, okay, so now everybody's in their own seat, but now, but during this next lesson or the next session, you can go and sit where you want to sit. And you might want to take some desks out of that equation, because there are students who'd like to have their own spaces where nobody touches what they have, but they should also be able to use the room freely, but also have a space that is not being used by others. So it's really like looking at what you have and using it in a different way. And like maybe a desk could be like a group desk instead. And then you can pull something out of the room and make a little bit more floor space, which is also important to feel that you have more space in the room. It could also be little things like the blankets, a basket of blankets or earmuffs, or many different things that would allow students to make a little bit of a choice or have a sense of autonomy in the space. I think if you look at the pictures also from the first part of our session, you'd see little examples of some of these things that are not expensive. Yeah.
Any other thoughts or
Any-
questions? Well, awesome. Well, we appreciate your time and helping to make this work. And it's always a pleasure to learn from you and hear from you. And every time I get a chance to hear you share the work that you do, I always walk away with so much too. So I know I selfishly appreciate it at the same time. So it was great to see you. I can't thank you enough for your time. And this has been really helpful for us as we continue to figure out how to create meaningful learning experiences for all.
Yeah, thank you all for playing along. It was such a pleasure to meet you all. Have fun. And I'm sure you're going to do awesome work with this as well. So thank you. And thanks, Aaron. Also great to
Yes.
see you again.
Thank you.
Very much.
Bye.